It's Friday, June 28. Good afternoon. I'm Herman Green with your midday news. If you're watching online at onespotmedia.com, a special welcome to you. The incumbent president of the People's National Party, Dr. Peter Phillips, launched his campaign last night for what is expected to be a hotly contested leadership race come September.
The theme, One PNP. The message, the PNP will win the next general election. Dr. Peter Phillips telling a packed audience at the quarterly auditorium Thursday night that under his leadership, this will come to pass. He laid out his vision for the 80-year-old political party, chief of which he says is to combine youth and experience at the representational level, a process he notes has already begun.
I only want the best for the party that I have served for over 40 years.
Another reason why he argues he should remain leader, he says he's paid his dues in service to the party.
I have served at every level, from group member, members of commissions, international affairs, political education where I was chairman, member of the secretariat team to general secretary, to member of parliament, to vice president, to campaign director, and finally, by your vote and your support as president of this great party.
Dr. Phillips also took a swipe at critics and the polls, which suggest that his favorability numbers have been declining.
Popularity comes and popularity goes, but leadership is more enduring. Leadership is rooted in experience. It is the twin of wisdom. It requires hard decisions, and it requires the ability to discriminate.
The PNP presidential election is set for September 7. Dr. Phillips will square off with challenger Peter Bunting. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
Approximately 40 domestic violence cases have been reported in St. Mary's since the start of the year. Speaking at a domestic violence prevention and intervention workshop yesterday, head of the St. Mary Police Division, Superintendent Bobbitt Morgan Simpson, revealed that there were 28 cases of domestic violence reported in what she called the boyfriend-girlfriend category. She says of those cases, 5 of the aggressors were women. She gave a breakdown of the other categories.
Uncle nephew 3, uncle niece 1, brother 7, aunt niece 1, aunt nephew 1, son mother 4, husband wife 3, and in the husband wife situation 2 of the wives were the aggressors. St. Mary has unfortunately been known to have murders being committed as a result of domestic violence. We have a history, and what is sad also that we have police that are involved in some of these murders.
Superintendent Morgan Simpson says one of the challenges they face is that sometimes the victims refuse to follow through with the charges.
Sometimes the situation is so bad that we have to send them to seek medical attention first before the statement is taken from them. Sometimes by the time they are to come back to give the statement, their mind change. They might encounter the man and they decide that, me no want to lock him up because he's my husband or he's my boyfriend and whatever. So that's a challenge that we face. However, once the statement, and I have told my staff, once the statement is written, is given, then you are going to go to court to let the judge decide what to do.
Chairman of Petrojam Strategic Review Committee, Christopher Zaka, says placing the oil refinery in private hands could create more jobs. This comes months after the committee was asked to look into operations at the scandal-plagued oil refinery.
If a suitable private sector lessee who has clearly expertise in refinery operations is identified, we see a positive impact on jobs at the refinery in the long run, and improved efficiencies, improved technology will mean continued economic development, including jobs. So we don't see any impact there. Where There would be an impact is if that process is not successful and the terminal, the refinery would be shut down and placed in a terminal-only operation. Clearly that would have an impact. But we are confident and optimistic that a suitable lessee will be identified in the next 2
Mr. Zaka was speaking at the press conference on Thursday, where he gave other recommendations to guide future operations at Petrojam. With climate and weather concerns heightened this year, the Meteorological Service of Jamaica is again warning persons to be careful in a number of areas. Climate Service Specialist Genoa Brown listed conservation of water as there would be less rainfall in coming months, keeping cool as record heat levels are already being recorded, and hurricane preparedness in the event of a storm. But he says the Meteorological Service has also created a web application which will help warn residents ahead of these serious occurrences.
Alert, right? And this Smart Alert app, what it does is to give you that critical information way ahead of time so you can plan better, right? So to access this app, it's very easy. It's just go on a web browser or on your mobile phone and type in alert.metservice, that's MET service.gov.jm.
The suggestion now is for everyone to use the app as a first alert this hurricane season and summer. But Mr. Brown says it's nothing new. The app is already being used by government entities.
We're currently using it with the Ministry of Agriculture, with our farmers and our extension officers, and also with our water sector, because those are sectors that are sensitive to climate change and climate impacts. So we're actually working with those sectors to see how best we can provide that type of early warning information way ahead of time.
And we now take a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. More stories after these messages. Welcome back, continuing the news. Minister without portfolio with responsibility for education, Carl Samuda, is continuing to defend the ministry's position that the timing of the primary exit profile, PEP, is right. It comes amidst criticisms that the government was hasty in its decision to roll out the primary school leaving exam.
All these exams that we had before, we had brilliant children doing very well. They did very well because they have the capacity to absorb and to remember. So they swat the exams and they come out on top.
Mr. Samuda also stated that students have given positive feedback about the first sitting of the exam.
And I've consulted with many of the kids, talked to them and so on. And actually many of them enjoy it. And the results have been very, very encouraging.
Robbers have struck again in St. Elizabeth, breaking into and stealing items from a popular business establishment in the parish. TVJ News understands that sometime after 2 o'clock this morning, the Mother's Restaurant on Main Street in St. Elizabeth was broken into. The robbers entered the restaurant through the drive-thru where they removed louver panes from the window. They made off with a steel vault containing money and a flat-screen television. A businessman who was on the scene this morning told our news team that his mini-mart store was robbed Sunday night. He said this is the 5th time he has been impacted by thieves in the last 18 months. We go on to news overseas. The Supreme Court says next term it will review President Donald Trump's decision to terminate an Obama-era program which protects hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children. A decision siding with the administration could strip protection for nearly 700,000 so-called dreamers. We have more from the CNN.
The Supreme Court just announcing that it will, in fact, hear arguments on the Trump administration's decision to wind down the DACA program. Of course, that's the program that was instituted by President Obama that protects these approximately 700,000 so-called dreamers. These are the young immigrants who came here as children. It protects them from deportation. The Trump administration in 2017, shortly after the president took office, decided to wind down this program, but it was blocked at the lower courts. The lower courts said you were doing this in an arbitrary and capricious manner, and you can't do it. So they stopped the wind down. That allowed those dreamers to continue their protections, continue their renewals. The Trump administration, though, has been blasting these decisions, saying that it's inappropriate for these lower court judges to issue these nationwide injunctions on their policies. So they've been pushing for the Supreme Court to take this case. The Attorney General, Bill Barr, has been particularly outspoken about the improper nature of these nationwide injunctions. So finally, the Trump administration will in fact be getting its day in court, something that they've been pushing for. We've been waiting for a decision like this to determine if the Supreme Court would take it for weeks. And what's interesting about this is the timing here. The Supreme Court, of course, ended their term yesterday, Poppy, but they will be back at it in October for their next term. That is when they will hear this DACA case. That means the arguments will be at the height of the election and the campaign season, and then the decision will come out likely just months before the election itself.
And further afield, the remains of Genoa's Morandi Bridge were blown up in a controlled explosion on Friday, nearly a year after the structure collapsed in a disaster that killed 43 people. Demolition experts brought down the two remaining towers of the highway bridge in dramatic fashion, making way for a new structure to be built on the site. 4,000 people were evacuated from their homes to clear the area, and explosives were attached to the legs and body of the bridge, which it went down in about 7 seconds in a flurry of smoke. The incident shocked Italy and prompted a fierce debate about the safety of the country's infrastructure. Built in the 1960s, the Morandi Bridge was a vital link of the A10 highway that connects northwestern Italy to France. We go on to sports. The Reggae Boys will play Panama in their quarterfinals of the Gold Cup on Sunday afternoon in Philadelphia. This will be the first time Jamaica is playing Panama at the Gold Cup since 1993. Jamaica's record against Panama is not formidable though, as the Reggae Boys have only beaten the Central Americans twice in 50 years. The last time Jamaica defeated Panama was in 2009. If Jamaica defeats Panama, then they will face either the United States or Curacao in the semifinals. And still on football, there is great hope for the national female footballers following the national team's recent World Cup debut. But it would seem the Reggae Girls squad for the upcoming Pan American Games in Peru will have to do without many of their World Cup heroes. The Reggae Girls are set to make only their second appearance at the Pan Am Games, but the country's best players may not be available.
Havana Salom, the half-time substitute.
We had the camp from May 12th, and we left there the night. We reached home the 19th of June. So you can see how much weeks. The tournament for the Pan Am Games is from July 26th to August 11th. And then you probably have a pre-tournament camp before that. And then the thing is, this is not in the FIFA window. So the clubs in Europe are not readily going to give you the players to come like that after losing so many weeks at the World Cup. So but the good thing is that you have a pool of players that you work with, and we register probably about 40 to 50 players, and we have to draw from that.
Now, as the Reggae Girls manager just said, the Pan American Games will be held from July 26 to August 11 in Lima, Peru. And that wraps up the Midday News. I'm Herman Green. Join us at 7 for Prime Time News. On behalf of the news, sports, and production teams, good afternoon.